Hare Krishna, welcome all. Thank you so much for joining us today. And we already have 41 participants, but we're expecting a few more. We had over 100 registrations. I think we can give it maybe a minute or so. I still see many people trying to join. Okay, well, I would like to introduce our two guests of honor, Partha Prabhu and Uttama Prabhu. Thank you so much for so graciously accepting our invitation to come and facilitate this presentation today and this Sangha. We so very appreciate this. Just a little introduction about Partha Prabhu and Uttama Prabhu. Partha Prabhu and Uttama Prabhu have been practicing Krishna consciousness for over 5 decades, 50 years. I know, older than I am. And they were married in 1971. They were introduced to Krishna consciousness in 73. They took initiation from Srila Prabhupada in 1973. They have served the movement in so many different capacities. Partha Prabhu was the temple president, Uttama Prabhu, right from deity worship to being a seamstress, then working with children, helping them with relationships, and so many sectors they have offered their services. And from the year 2004, they took a plunge and they decided that this is their calling to help devotees with especially marriage counseling, relationships. And it's such an honor to have you all today. I mean, being married for 50 years, I mean, you know, I don't have to say anything else. Thank you so much for joining us today. And so this session is going to be very interactive. We're going to be breaking you out into small breakout rooms. We sent out an email just an hour back so that you would have it handy and wouldn't get lost in your inbox with the scenario and some other printouts that they have so graciously put together. You're going to be using that in the presentation. So when we, you know, most of y'all are familiar with the Zoom platform by now because of COVID. But for those that aren't, you know, when we split y'all into breakout rooms, you don't have to do anything. You'll be just moved into a smaller group and brought back. Just participate and make the best of what you can, this online Sangha. Thank you so much. I want to turn this over to Uttama Prabhu and Partha Prabhu. Yes, you can unmute and mute yourself whenever you like.
Okay.
So Hare Krishna. We're so glad to be with you today. Govinda Priya didn't quite have it right. I was the one who was the temple president. My husband was the head pujari.
Wow.
You know, there's a little, I was just president of our Saranagati Corporation for about 10 years because nobody else wanted to do the administrative stuff. So we'll put a caveat in that. But seeing as it's a women's Sangha, I thought I should bring that out.
Thank you.
And I feel very honored to be here in your sacred territory. And I hope I don't say anything to offend you and you will throw me out on the streets. So thank you for inviting us. So today we'd like to talk about compassion. I'm just going to put a slide up here for 1 second.
Keep talking. Keep talking even though.
Compassion is...
you have to,
I have to get bigger here.
You have to do this. Otherwise it's going to do that.
Oops, sorry. Sorry, 1 second.
You'd think we've used Zoom enough, we'd get this down. There we go. So compassion, it's a very important element of Krishna consciousness. And the basis of what we're saying is ultimately that
it starts with the fact that we're all eternal parts and parcels of Krishna. That's undeniable. We are eternally parts and parcels of Krishna. And as parts and parcels of Krishna, in our pure forms, we all possess the 26 qualities of pure devotees, because we all in our original forms have pure spiritual natures. And one of those spiritual qualities is the quality of compassion. And so we would like to examine today some things about compassion, and also how sometimes we can fall a little bit short at being compassionate and even fail at compassion, and also how we can reconnect with our compassionate, eternal spiritual natures. So there was a very interesting study done by a gentleman by the name of Dr. Stephen Stosny, who's dedicated his life to studying compassion and why people fail at compassion. He was actually researching the subject of domestic abuse and trying to understand why people fail at compassion in these close relationships. And during his research, he interviewed thousands of people, including people who were in prison, who were murderers, and he found that absolutely everyone, unless they were complete psychopaths, a part of their nature was that they wanted to be better husbands, better fathers. They wanted to contribute to society. They wanted to be compassionate, but somehow they became disconnected from that core value within themselves. And so that's very much in line with what we understand through Vaishnavism. We understand we're pure spirit souls in essence with these spiritual qualities which have become covered over. So again, we're going to explore some ways we can refine and bring out our compassionate natures. So we're going to begin by asking you to think of some time when you exhibited some compassion to someone. Maybe that was you met someone and you were their first contact with Krishna consciousness. You were their Vartmana Padarksha guru. And, what did that feel like when you told that person about Krishna, or maybe just even just preaching to someone who was interested in Krishna consciousness, or maybe you experienced compassion in terms of comforting a friend who was in distress, or a child that was hurt. Maybe you comforted that child. So I just ask you just for a moment to reflect upon what that felt like in those moments where you were exhibiting compassion to someone else. What was that feeling? And I'm just going to ask you if you can all go to that chat box and just write in that box in a few words what it felt like when you exhibited compassion. So I'll just give you a minute to do that.
So we want to see a stream of words flowing down that chat box. Oh, freeing, natural, grateful, ecstatic. Felt the connection. That's important. Yes.
Relief, heart
relief,
flowing.
Heart flowing. Oh. So great working with a room of ladies. I don't know. Serenity, wholehearted. Oh, wow. You guys are such great participants. So it felt like you're being responsible. That's a nice one. Yeah. Warm. Okay. Yes, to get the warm fuzzy.
Yeah. Wholehearted.
Empowered. Yes, somehow we feel empowered, don't we? Yeah.
So I'm just going to ask you also, we understand from our Shastra also how within this material world, there's 3 modes of material nature. And so I'll just ask you, you can write in the chat box, what mode of material nature do you think you were in when you were exhibiting compassion? Pretty easy. Goodness. Yes.
Okay, you've all passed the test.
Okay. So, and goodness, especially if we're exhibiting compassion in terms of Krishna consciousness, that is actually bringing us to pure goodness, or Shuddha Sattva, which is our desired goal, to become completely free from all the modes of material nature. So now I'd like to take a look at the complete, total opposite end of the spectrum, which would be an abject failure at compassion. And unfortunately, sometimes we see these things. I had one friend many years ago, seemed like a very nice devotee. He was one of the biggest Sankirtan devotees, gave great classes, completely charming personality. I was in him. I was with him in a car once. He got stopped by the police for something. He just gave the policeman this big smile. The policeman was actually a little agitated, but the guy was so charming, the policeman just let him go. So he seemed like such a wonderful personality. And then some devotees witnessed him sometime later. It was a big Harinam, and everyone was going to their cars, and someone saw him with his family getting in their car. The wife is pregnant. She's halfway in the car, her leg's out of the car, and he's slamming the door on her leg and screaming at her. This is the same charming person. So somehow that individual had this complete abject failure of compassion. So that is the extreme failure of compassion, domestic abuse. So there's a spectrum of how we can fail at abuse or be compassionate. So we'd like to look at, I'm sure none of us are abusive, but all in our life, sometimes we fall a little short at being compassionate. Especially, there's this unusual phenomenon in this world that sometimes the individuals that we love the most and we're closest to, sometimes we treat them in maybe not so nice ways. Like in the temple or on Sankirtan, everyone you meet, you're very nice and polite and kind. But sometimes when we're in our homes and behind closed doors, we tend to say things that are a little cruel or a little thoughtless. So we'd like to examine why is there this disconnect and how we can stop that disconnect from occurring. And that's a very important thing for us to progress in spiritual life, because we want to develop and nourish our compassionate natures.
So, because we're all subject to times when we just lack exhibiting compassion, we thought we'd break you into groups, and you can discuss in your little chats what causes you personally to respond without compassion on occasion. So Govinda Priya is going to break you up into little chats of probably about 6 people each. And you can discuss what causes you personally to respond without compassion in certain circumstances, at certain times. Why do you think you do that?
How long would you like these?
Oh, thank you very much. We're going to give you 15 minutes. And what I suggest is, as soon as you get into the chat, have one person be the timekeeper, put a 2-minute timer on, let one person speak for 2 minutes. When it beeps, the next person go, and that way you'll be sure to all have a chance. So we'll give you 15 minutes there in your chat rooms.
Please join your rooms.
I've been invited to join breakout room 6.
Okay,
Okay, I get to join, I guess.
No,
okay.
Are we in your breakout room here?
Except for your mic is muted.
So in 7 seconds, everyone will be back.
Okay, so everyone in your group already finished?
Well, I didn't leave because there's people.
Okay.
So I was in the room. All right, we have everyone back.
All right, didn't take too long. Okay.
Okay.
Pause. All right. So are we on?
Yes.
Okay. So Hare Krishna, we popped in a few breakout rooms there. Sounds like you had some great conversations going there. We're just going to ask you to pop in the box again a list of feelings about a time when you failed to exhibit compassion and what that felt like. Just one or two words again. So pop your feelings in the chat box there. Ooh, bad, selfish, guilty, disappointing, not my best, conflicted, angry. A lot of guilt. That's really, yeah, common. Need to recharge. Yeah. Ooh, vicious. Upset with myself.
Stressed, self-centered.
Yeah. Self-centeredness is a big part of it, I think. We just get focused on us instead of the other person. Overwhelm. Yeah. Selfish. Okay. So what kind of modes are these in?
So I'm just going to ask you again, like, which mode of material nature do you consider failing at the compassion to be in?
Ignorance.
Yeah,
okay.
pretty much ignorance and passion. That's a given. And probably a pretty obvious question, which felt better, being in ignorance or being in goodness?
Goodness, yes. He's quick there.
And okay, now I have a question. Do you have a choice? Which mode do you want to be in?
Yes.
Yes. So, and again, which one is the real you? The compassionate you or the one that feels like compassion? Which is the real you?
A mix.
Compassion. Well, that's honest.
In the material world, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But the real spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So some of the reasons we heard that we have failures at compassion are, things like we're stressed or we're tired, caretaker syndrome, like we're burned out. What are some of the other ones?
The need to be right.
Need to be right.
Fearful.
Mm-hmm. Fearful. So there's many apparent reasons that we could justify being failures at compassion. But I'd like you to reflect on a minute for Srila Prabhupada, who never wavered in his compassion. And Prabhupada, he worked so hard. Sometimes Prabhupada was ill and he was just relentless in his caring for devotees and preaching. I spent time with Srila Prabhupada in his final pastimes in 77. Now Srila Prabhupada, he was unaffected by that. And he was just, that compassionate nature just shone through despite all those external impediments that would cause any of us to become, short-fused or just want to withdraw into ourselves.
When I'm sick, I'm pretty grumpy.
So that's this phenomena that we fail at compassion, and especially sometimes we fail at compassion with those who are closest to us, our family members and our friends. And there's this cruel irony there. And one of the reasons that happens is that our sense of self-worth comes from how that we perceive those who love us and care for us view us. So it's just like if you're on Sankirtan, doing Harinam, and someone says, "Oh, you're a stupid Hare Krishna." Like, so what? Like Prabhupada said, dogs may bark, but the caravan will pass. That doesn't really affect us. But if someone very close to us says, "Oh, that was stupid. Why did you do that? That was so dumb. How could you be like that?" Those things actually really pain our heart. And when we feel that internal pain, we may feel unloved or uncared for. Maybe we don't feel understood. When we feel that kind of negative emotion, sometimes we tend to lash out. Prabhupada gave this example once of how in a healthy marriage, he said, sometimes husband and wife, there may be some little disagreement. And Prabhupada said, but it's like a bolt of thunder in India. There's a big boom and there's no rain. But we see in the day and age we live in now where we kind of lost touch with our spirituality. Couples have a little disagreement and it explodes into something huge and ongoing, and sometimes those relationships end up in divorce. So because of this great disconnect. So a lot of times what causes the disconnect or causes the friction in relationship, it's maybe not really the incident that you're fighting about or the issue. It's that somehow we feel unloved and uncared for in those close relationships. And that pain causes us to maybe lash out in ways that are not so constructive. And so a lot of times women, they may complain and criticize. Sometimes men also, they complain and criticize. And a lot of men in those situations, they'll just withdraw, which is actually even more painful for women. So it's important to understand why these disconnects are happening. And if we think in terms of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna describes in the 14th chapter the modes of material nature. And that's actually a very, very important chapter. And there's a very wonderful purport there, which described how the modes are competing for supremacy. And in one purport, Srila Prabhupada describes how this competition of the modes, it's always going on. Therefore, one who is actually intent on advancing in Krishna consciousness has to transcend these modes. The prominence of some certain mode of nature is manifest in one's dealings, in his activities, eating, etc. So as we saw, we fail at compassion, it's the mode of passion and ignorance. When we're compassionate, it's a manifestation of the mode of goodness. So Prabhupada says, if one wants, he can develop by practice the mode of goodness and thus defeat the modes of ignorance and passion. So Prabhupada is saying by practice, we can develop that mode of goodness. And we all have this experience of our subtle failures at being compassionate and seeing how we actually have this need to become free from that influence of the modes. Uttama was just listening to a Prabhupada lecture this morning, and Prabhupada said that devotional service begins when you become free from passion and ignorance. So, well, at least that's kind of a wake-up call. We really need to find out how we can, we try to get this visual hook of a switch. We have to switch on that compassion in those moments when there's provocations for us to fail at compassion.
So a lot of times in our seminars, we try to give practical tools how we can actually practice staying in the mode of goodness, in the compassionate way, in our relationships. So in essence, it's not that difficult to become sattvic, but we have to learn which behaviors are sattvic and just practice them. And the more we practice them, the more they'll become natural. Now, I'm not saying that after the seminar, you practice it 1 or 2 times, you're going to come out and you're going to be a whiz at it all. Everything that I've ever got good at, I practiced at least 500 times. It was my 500th chapati that got good and round consistently. So we have to practice, and then we'll become more natural. So then we'll eventually sustain ourselves in the mode of goodness, and the mode of goodness will help us to elevate ourselves to pure goodness. And then it'll be like in the spiritual world where, all walking is dancing and all talking is singing. We have to get to these pure platforms. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he wrote quite nicely on compassion in Jaiva Dharma. And he gave this sort of definition. He said, a natural human sentiment, compassion, finds its highest expression in the works of devotees of the Lord. The tenderness of the heart experienced towards Krishna is known as bhakti. All other jivas are servants of Krishna, and when one experiences tenderness of heart towards them, it is known as daya or compassion. So he was saying that therefore compassion is included within bhakti. So, such a wonderful definition, this tenderness of the heart towards the sufferings of others. very often Srila Prabhupada would say that a Vaishnava is paradukkha dukhi. He becomes distressed to see the sufferings of others and has compassion. That tenderness of heart goes out towards them. So we were going to share 3 very important skills that can help us exhibit compassion more consistently. And one of them is 2 of Rupa Goswami's loving exchanges, where we reveal our minds in confidence and we hear in confidence. Because we know that when we're understood, when we can share Krishna consciousness very deeply with another friend, it's very, very healing, almost even therapeutic when we feel understood in this loving exchange in confidence. It's a sort of empathy that we share with each other. Because empathy, it's a willingness to feel with the other person and to really understand their inner world. I think it was Stephen Covey. He did some studies and he found that understanding is only second to needing food and water. After that, the most important need of the living entity is to be understood. So when we're able to, reach out and feel with another person and to understand their inner world, it's very, very healing. We also find, though, that during conflict, when empathy is the most important, it's the hardest. Like to empathize with somebody else when their hurt feelings are a result of something we said or did, and not to defend ourselves. That requires quite a lot of skill and practice to not get in the defensive mode and to be compassionate for their hurt feelings. So we teach this all the time in our couples work and in our premarital education. And couples that have mastered, how to do that reflective listening with empathy, they tell us it's like a light switch that gets turned on in their relationship, that their cycles of conflict, they drastically change. It's because the partners, they stop defending their positions and instead they seek to understand each other. And then they're becoming like a team against the conflict. Do you want to throw something in?
Yeah, I'd just like to say that in terms of resolving conflict, in terms of using the skill of reflective listening or Rupa Goswami's recommendation of a loving exchange, generally, as I was saying, what we're fighting about is not so much the issue. We're fighting because we don't feel loved and understood. And once we feel loved and understood, the issue becomes very much minimized. And in terms of Vaishnavism, when you engage in Rupa Goswami's loving exchange of hearing and revealing your mind, that's loving devotional service. So even we're doing that about a disagreement, it's devotional service, respectfully hearing each other, and in devotional service, the ocean of material existence shrinks to the amount of water in the hoofprint of a calf. So by doing that, your problems become much more manageable and easier to solve.
So we have to think that if we're having a difficulty exhibiting compassion or having trouble like climbing into that hole with our partner, we can start by just being curious about what they're feeling. Ask questions to help you understand, why are you feeling like that? Or why did you have this point of view? Because that curiosity is going to make it easier for us to empathize with their experience and be compassionate once we can understand their feelings.
I very much appreciate Mataji's, because they have a natural inclination towards empathy. And actually, for women, empathy is a very important need for women. And conversely, for men, many men have a very hard time trying to be empathic. And one of the reasons there's a real cultural conditioning that men get from their birth that boys don't cry. You just suck up your emotions and just keep going. And I know some men, their father, even if they would cry, they would get hit. Like, so they just, from a young age, they could never really express their emotions. So that makes it very difficult for men. And also, it's also a challenge for men because men tend to be a little more logically oriented than emotionally oriented. And so for men, it's very, especially in the age we're living in now, it's very hard for men to understand and process their emotions. And the result of that, we have this culture, which is known as toxic masculinity, which apparently the World Health Organization actually declared that to be a health hazard. It's actually a serious health hazard, this toxic masculinity. And in Canada, they discovered the last 10 years, the male suicide rate increased 4 times in 10 years. In the US, it increased 3.5% in 10 years. So that's the male suicide rate. The female suicide rate remained the same. And they did some research in Canada, and they concluded it's this toxic masculinity. It's actually a great contributing factor in male suicide, male stress, male mental disease. So it's a huge problem in the world amongst men. And you, as ladies, as mothers or future mothers or grandmothers, wives, friends, you have an extremely important role to play in society to help nurture in men, whether it's your children, your grandsons, and even your husband, to help them bring out that emotional side. It's an extremely important contribution that you can make to society as a woman to help men develop that. And we can see in the current situation in the world now how there's huge failures of compassion all over the world right now. There's so many violent things going on. And actually starting in our own lives, our own friendships, communities, we can begin to make some change which is needed in this world. So it's a very important topic. Developing this compassion, and this compassionate empathy is extremely important spiritual quality. And I will say one other thing, men need help. They're not hopeless. They need help. And actually on the 27th, we're going to do a seminar with which ministry? I mean, we're doing another
somebody else.
Yeah. And we're going to specifically talk about this male-female paradox, which involves men's difficulty in being open to emotions.
So when people habitually state their needs in the forms of criticism or complaints, that can also trigger negative cycles. So we're just going to mention like a second little skill here of being aware to rephrase our complaints as requests, because complaining tends to trigger reactive cycles in relationships. And complaints are really just a little mask that is masking our core need underneath, which our friend or our partner probably doesn't know about. And so we get frustrated, and these frustrated needs tend to stack up. And then we just complain. And if they stack up too much, it might even turn into anger, criticism. We can even escalate into blaming attacks at each other. So it's very important to learn the skill of looking inside and being compassionate to share what we need with the other person, and just requesting instead of complaining. Like, you never put your socks in the laundry, or would you mind putting your dirty laundry in the basket? It's such a different response when you hear a complaint to a request. And it's so easy to get into complaining as a mother too. Whereas when we just switch and make a request instead of a complaint, it's so much easier to hear. So while it's important for us to complain without blame and state that request as a positive need, we also need to learn to listen non-defensively with compassion. We have to also learn how to deal when we're on the other side of a complaint. So in order to receive complaints,
Talk about a common complaint of ladies.
no, not right now.
Okay.
When
Sorry,
I just got derailed. When you interrupt me, when I'm thinking I can't remember what I was going to say.
Let me tell you something.
Okay.
I have a vivid memory talking with one couple. They were quite conflicted. We sat down with them, and the wife said, "My husband never talks to me." And so I just said to her, "Well, if I take your words at face value," I said, "You've been married 15 years? I'm hearing that he's never talked to you in 15 years. Is that correct?" She said, "No." And so I said to her, what I'm actually hearing behind your words, and generally people, they say you never and you always, usually those words are masking some inner hurt or some inner deep feeling. So I said, what I'm hearing is that when your husband does talk to you, it actually means a lot to you. It makes you feel loved and protected. And because you're not receiving that from him, that's very frustrating for you. And she said, yeah. So I said, if you can explain to him how when he does listen to you and how does exhibit some empathy, that makes you feel loved and protected. That he can understand. But if you just criticize him, you're going to get the opposite of what you want. And they actually had a dramatic change in their relationship just by her learning to make a compassionate request instead of continually complaining. So saying what you need with compassion is in the mode of goodness, whereas complaining, what you're not getting, is in the mode of passion and ignorance.
Mm-hmm. So when we do receive blame and complaints, though, it's up to us to try to situate ourselves in the mode of goodness, to self-soothe from, our emotional brain can get escalated, and we can, hit over to our, the modes of passion and ignorance. But somehow or other, if we can take a minute, take a breath, self-soothe, then we might be able to maintain ourselves and our connection. Because one of the things that you felt when you were exhibiting compassion is that connection. So in order to get back to that connection, we have to somehow or other self-soothe a little bit and try to get ourselves into the mode of goodness and then respond in a mode of goodness way. So part of that is to not take the other person's complaints personally. Because usually when a person's complaining, it's about their needs. It isn't really about us. It's just about what their needs. So if we can self-soothe and not become defensive, then we can be compassionate and be there for the other person. And that is a huge, huge way to build trust in relationships. When we can listen compassionately to another person. Because in relationships of high trust, if I'm upset and the other person just stops everything and comes to listen, I feel that as great security. So we have this inherent belief in close relationships that when I'm in distress, the other person's going to be there for me. So this reaching out and just not taking it personally and being there for the other person, it goes a long way to building trust in relationships, whether it's husband and wife relationships, friendships, community members. That's one of the ways in which we build trust. Whereas if we give a defensive response, it's actually weakening our relationships and weakening that sense of trust that this is really community and people are going to be there for me. So we do need to learn how to respond non-defensively and look and see what's the longing in the other person, what's the need that they have in that moment. And maybe even if they're a little bit upset, we need to not be afraid and just turn towards that anger, not away, and try to discover what it is that the other person needs. So when we teach this in premarital education and Grihastha courses, we usually use a little story to illustrate this. And we call it Finding the Pony. So it's a story about two boys, tiptoeing down the stairs early one Christmas morning, hoping to find this pony that they've been promised as a Christmas present. But underneath the tree, there was this odious smelling excrement. And the young boy, he just burst into tears and he ran upstairs and went back to bed. He said, just feeling like I'm not worthy. I just get like a pile of poop,
Horse poop.
Horse poop. But the other boy said, well, wait a minute. There's only one way that poop can be here is if there's a pony outside. And sure enough, off he went to find the pony. So we illustrate this story as a graphic example that when it feels like someone's kind of like throwing that stuff at us that doesn't smell too good, maybe it's a time to go out and look and see where's the pony. In other words, what's the unmet need of that person? So say, for example, my husband came home really late from work and he walks in the door and I said, you never come home on time. Okay, so I just kind of threw something at him so he could respond very defensively.
I got it. And I could respond and say, what do you mean? I'm working so hard for the family, trying to pay all the bills and look after you guys. Don't you appreciate that? I just throw it back at her.
That's not going to calm you down at all. I'm going to feel resentful. What about what I did? All day, what have I been doing?
And so the whole rest of that evening is going to be completely ruined because we just totally escalated and just off into the modes of passion and ignorance for the rest of the night.
So let's try it again. And he's going to find my pony. You never come home on time.
Oh, I can see that you're disturbed. I'm guessing maybe that you must have had some plans for the evening and you're probably disappointed I didn't phone and tell you I was going to be late.
Yeah, the kids made this like really fun dessert and we were hoping you'd enjoy it, join us for dinner. And so anyway, you could see I deflated, completely different response when someone tries to find your need. You want to try it?
Okay.
He has a hard time complaining.
He's always interrupted in the middle of when I'm talking.
So what do I say to that? It's like you don't even know how to answer them. Okay, I won't say anything. So, you can throw it back, but you can also withdraw. Neither one of them is very conducive to building connection. Whether you respond very passionately with anger or you just kind of get in the mode of ignorance and you just go and withdraw. Both of them aren't very productive. So let's try it again.
Okay. You always interrupt me right in the middle of a sentence.
So I'm hearing you need me to feel what you have to say is important.
Right. And that would help if you let me finish what I'm saying.
It's just that I know what you're going to say. See if you don't. Right?
That's an assumption.
Yeah, but I think I'm always right. So what I'm hearing is that I'm not always right.
What happens is you change the dynamic from passion and ignorance into goodness, and it becomes a easily negotiable dialogue. Because when those kind of challenges, when they come up, they tend to end on the same note that they start. So if they start in passion and ignorance, it's going to be like a vicious game of tennis. It's batting the ball back and forth. But if either one of you can bring it to the mode of goodness, either by starting with a humble, compassionate request, or if it's already escalated a little bit by finding the pony, you help de-escalate it back towards the mode of goodness, and it becomes much more manageable in the mode of goodness.
So we are going to let you try this skill. Because once you get used to it, it's pretty easy, but it does take a little practice to not respond defensively, and it takes a little practice to not just try to find a solution. First, before solutions, you need to find the need so the other person feels understood. So if you'd like to open up to your scenario sheet there, there's some instructions where you can take turns dramatically reading one of the scenarios, and then the next person can try to find your pony by, excuse me, by replying with some version of, oh, I'm hearing that you need, is that correct? Or I'm guessing you would like, or when you do that, you feel, something like that.
There's one little bit of advice, like sometimes it can be very hard to, well, what's their need? But you can, even just the fact that you say, I'm guessing that maybe you need, it shows that you care. It's like an offering. I'm trying to be empathic to you. I'm showing that I care about you. I'm guessing that you feel. So if you say that, or you say, I'm guessing that you, or you may, I'm thinking that you feel, is that correct? And if you're not correct, they'll either say no, and you can say, well, can you tell me a little more? Or they'll come out and say, no, I'm actually feeling this.
Or needing this or whatever.
But the fact that you reach toward with compassion, they'll respond a little more compassionately.
So Govinda Priya is going to break you up into groups again, and you can take turns finding ponies. And we'll give you 15 minutes again.
And when you finish sharing, you can maybe let Govinda know, and we'll reconvene if everyone's finished before 15 minutes. I don't know how big the groups are.
Sure. So there'll be 4 to 5 participants in each group.
Oh, only 4. Okay.
Okay.
Then I'll have 2 each. Okay, that'll work.
Perfect. 25 seconds, everyone will be here. So please unmute yourselves now, so we can less distraction. So breakout room 1 is not leaving. I think they're having a real conversation going there.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, everyone is back.
Okay.
Okay, we have to 2 o'clock, so let's just take some feedback.
Yeah.
Let's take feedback.
So what's the experience like finding the pony? Can people put their hands and we unmute them, or?
Yes, you can raise your hand in the chat or just type that I want to share something. What? Okay. I can unmute you all. If you raise your hand and just say, okay, perfect. I see some hands now.
There's a good one there. It helps me slow down my reaction.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very key thing, because when the person's dumping on us and throwing that horse manure at us, we tend to just respond instantly. But between the stimulus and when we respond, we have a little space in there where we can choose how we're going to react in that same lower mode or try to elevate it to goodness. So we have this little choice. So that slowing it down by just envisioning, okay, the pony, where's the pony? It slows it down, helps us to go to goodness. So that's a very good point, helps you slow it down.
That was a great remark there from Sachi Priya about it's like finding the missing puzzle piece. Sachi, do you want to expand a bit on like what was missing there?
Sachi, right?
So
that's Sudevi Saki. It was Sachi Priya.
yeah, actually I was unmuted. So
Yes,
go ahead.
because you raised your hand.
yeah, so I just wanted to share my experience. It was quite a learning experience. I tried to defend as usual, and then I came to know how actually we should be responding, and then I learned, and then I tried, and at the end I was a little successful.
All right, thanks. There was.
I have unmuted you in case you want
to. For me, it feels like finding the missing puzzle piece, in that I
She froze up there.
Are we frozen or she's frozen?
She is.
Oh, sorry, Sachi, there you are frozen. We can maybe try you again in a minute.
So
there was one from Brajarani about it takes me out of myself. And that's a really important point of it, because, you know, in the material world, it tends to be I, me, mine, all about me. What about me? What about my thing? What about my thing? And so it's really important to be able to have that binocular vision. It's not that you don't have your point of view, but when you can see from the other person's point of view also, you have a much broader perspective of what's going on. And very often we just make assumptions on something. And when we stop and try to find the need, we learn so much. So, you know, it's really true.
We say paradukha dukhi, that a quality of a Vaishnava is he actually feels the pain of another person. So that actually helps us, as you say, get out of ourselves into in the shoes of the other person.
And some person was noticing the experience about how your anger and frustration get deflated. And that's really is a benefit. It helps to get your conversations de-escalated so you can talk very nicely. And somebody else was commenting that when you're trying to find the other person's pony, it gives you time to shift yourself to the compassion mode. And that's true. Yeah. Oh, and engages the wise mind rather than the reactive mind. Yes, very nice. Got some great comments there.
The wise mind or the wife's mind? Just kidding.
Wife's
Just
mind
kidding.
and wise mind are synonymous. When are you going to realize that? It's the same thing. Doesn't matter.
I can always unmute anyone who wants to make a comment. So just raise your hand in the chat and. Okay.
Oh, somebody was saying that one person was saying that you don't have to apologize before finding and confirming the pony. That's very true. That does help to make it easier, because when you apologize, it's almost like you're trying to get out of it, or you're not really understanding the other person. So apologies are good after the fact. It's true. Nice point. Thank you, Ananda.
So we can just imagine a world where in every home, children are growing up in a house that's full of ponies. Wouldn't that be a wonderful atmosphere to grow up in? Where kids, you know, have this loving, compassionate atmosphere in their homes. And, you know, as opposed to if we have homes where there's either huge pieces of horse manure flying around or even just little pieces of horse manure flying around. And so we want to have those kind of compassionate relationships. And, you know, even sometimes as aspiring Vaishnavas, you know, we're going to have some little moments where the lower modes affect us, and maybe we have little arguments. But the fact that we're trying to improve and trying to come to the mode of goodness, and especially for children growing up, they can see their parents maybe having some difficulties and having a few little arguments, but the fact that they see their parents can work those arguments out, they care about each other, they're compassionate about each other, and they love each other, that's a huge learning experience for children. So we actually have a responsibility upon ourselves to develop these compassionate qualities for our own spiritual advancement, and also to our spouses, to our children, to our community, and actually to the whole world, because compassion is something that's so strongly needed in the world. And you know, as they say, there's things called the grassroots movements, that sometimes if we try to change the things we can change, gradually that can turn into something very much bigger, and we can actually change the world by changing ourselves first. And if we don't change ourselves, we can't change the world. Yeah. So I'd just like to conclude by saying that
we'll conclude and then we'll take some
Yeah,
discussion.
yeah. So the ability to lead a compassionate life, it actually lies within all of our hands. And it's just a matter of us making the choices in our lives moment to moment to access compassion and, you know, turn on compassion. And that's why we use that little image in the front of turning on the switch. We simply have to turn that switch and choose to move towards compassion. And Srila Prabhupada had it, you know, in the masthead of Back to Godhead. You'll see in the top of the magazine, Godhead is light, the essence is darkness, and where there's no Godhead, where there's Godhead, there's no essence. So if we can see that, how our behavior will be pleasing to Krishna if we develop this compassionate nature, we can change ourselves, our families, and the world around us. So thank you, and we'll take any questions now if anyone has questions.
Or comments or discussion.
Leela Shukaprabhu has raised her hand, and I'm going to unmute you, Leela Shukaprabhu.
Okay. Please share.
Hare Krishna. So nice
Hare
to
Krishna.
Thank you for
Yes.
doing this very important, addressing this very important topic. I'm wondering if you would be so kind as to speak about compassion toward oneself.
Mm-hmm. Very essential, because in order to have compassion to other people, we actually need to have compassion towards ourselves, because we are, as my husband was saying, eternal parts and parcels of Krishna, and Krishna loves us. And so we do need to see that, you know, we are doing the best we can, and to, you know, have compassion towards ourselves so that we're not too hard on ourselves. And when we don't judge ourselves, it's much easier to stay on that mindset of not judging others. And it gives us that, we can become relaxed enough that we can even be compassionate with others. Did you want to add to that?
And compassionate with ourselves means seeing what we need as individuals for our spiritual progress. And that also includes making our material situation suitable so we can progress spiritually. And there was a very prominent negative paradigm early in the movement, which is still somewhat prevalent, is that, well, because we're devotees, we shouldn't have needs or desires, because a pure devotee is desireless, so we shouldn't have needs. But we have a wonderful example in the Bhagavatam of Kardama Muni, who performed austerities for 100 celestial years. And all of a sudden he noticed Lord Narayan descending on the back of Garuda, coming down before him. And Lord Narayan said, well, my dear Kardama Muni, I'm very pleased by your austerities. I'll grant you any boon you want, any benediction you want. So he could ask for anything. And what he said was, my dear Lord, I think I need a wife of like disposition. And so some brahmacharis said that 20 years ago, 30 years ago. All the other brahmacharis would have said, you're in Maya, Prabhu, you shouldn't have those kind of needs. But actually, Lord Vishnu's, he said, well, actually, Swayambhuva Manu, he's coming here in a few days, and his daughter actually has a crush on you, and she's coming with him. So
Prabhupada commented that Kardama Muni was intelligent enough to know what he needed in order to make advancement in Krishna consciousness. So part of self-compassion is to allow yourself to have those needs. You know, I'm sure you could expand on that quite nicely too.
Well, you know, because I deal with people who have experienced considerable trauma during their foundational part of life, through serving with the Child Protection Office for everyone here who I don't know. I generally take Jiva Doya to be self-applied first. I encourage that, but I really haven't had a discussion about this topic as you have created the space for today. So that's why I thought to ask it, you know. Jiva Doya is a principle within our own Shastras. So is it true to say that we need to apply that to ourselves first, and then perhaps some ways that we do that?
Right. What way do you do it?
Oh, you're going to turn it back to me. Okay. I did hear that Srila Prabhupada said, health first, sadhana second, service third.
Mm-hmm.
And especially as women, I think that we tend to be socialized, and we do that to ourselves to say, I need to do for others. I need to do for others. So we have that upside down, and we do the service first, sadhana second, and then take care of our own self as a tertiary, if that.
Right.
So I personally keep that in mind, that I need to take care of myself.
Thank you for sharing that and bringing up that important point. I was noticing when I was popping in on chat rooms for when people can't exhibit compassion, a lot of the times it was just as you said, it was because they hadn't done that self-compassion. They were hungry, they were tired, they were upset about something. They hadn't done that self-compassion. So just the last week, my husband was complaining I was cutting him off too much. And I was thinking, you know what? I haven't been for a walk in a week. You know, it's like, I got to get out there and go for a walk, that I don't have to, like, you know, I could connect the two, you know, that I hadn't been looking after myself. And so I was, you know, dumping on him.
One thing that can be helpful for the ladies to understand in their marital relationships is when sometimes men have that space where they need to go in their man cave. It's a form of their self-compassion.
Okay, you got your say.
But also that shouldn't be a permanent thing.
All right. So Govinda Priya, you want to, thanks, Nilujuka.
Thank you.
Yes, we have Malati Prabhu who wants to.
Okay, go ahead, Malati.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you both so much. My question sort of relates to a point you just made, Partha Das, about wanting a mate with like disposition, somewhat similar. When you have disagreements with a partner, not necessarily about situations, but fundamental differences in values, core values. Tell me more about how compassion plays into those conversations.
If you have respect for each other, core values which are different, and you can honor those differences and respect them, those differences can actually become a source of strength. We have a god sister who's a Prabhupada disciple, and her husband's a Muslim. So that's a very core difference. But actually they learn to respect each other's difference, and they have a very extremely dynamic relationship, preaching each other's communities, but it came by that mutual respect. If there isn't that respect, that can be problematic. So it's important in those situations that the mutual respect has to be developed.
There's also a lot of research done by the Gottman Institute on relationships and marriage. And they find that 69% of couples' disagreements, even in happy marriages, sometimes do not have solutions. And those are the situations where their values differ, because you can't change your core values, but they're kind of clashing now and then. So in that case, you're never going to find a solution. I'm never going to be super early, and he's never going to be happy to be late. But we negotiate. You know, I try a little harder, and he's a little bit more, patient. So we learn how to negotiate it. And like my husband was saying, you negotiate it with respect. So you may not get a solution, but you will have ongoing respectful negotiation.
And Gottman's research found that those marriages, they're actually very happy, even though they have these differences. And it's like those differences can actually strengthen your bond because you learn that mutual respect. And those differences are actually created by Krishna for a purpose, for us to learn, especially in marriage. There are opportunities to learn patience, tolerance, and respect, which are qualities we need to chant the holy name constantly. So being in that situation, especially in close relationships like marriage, it's a wonderful opportunity to develop Vaishnava qualities of patience and respect and tolerance.
Hare Krishna.
So Adi Gaurangi Prabhu is asking, can you please define empathy and how it is different than sympathy?
Sympathy is, well, I'm really sorry that happened to you. So sympathy is kind of about me, that I'm sorry for you. I'm really sorry that happened to you. I'm really sorry you smashed your car up and it's going to cost you a fortune. I'm really sorry for you. It's about me. But empathy is, well, that must be, you must be feeling very, distressed by that. I can imagine there's a lot of pressure on you. I'm trying to actually get inside your mind and heart and try to understand what you're actually feeling. That's empathy. So empathy,
you feel with the person.
Yeah, you feel with the person. But sympathy is about me expressing my feelings toward you. I'm very sorry that happened to you. It's about me. It's nice. Being sorry is a little comforting that someone at least is a little communicating you, but empathy, someone actually connects with you in a very deep and meaningful way. And also the dynamic of empathy is that if I'm empathic towards you, what is happening, if I'm reflecting back with empathy, what you're saying and deeply understanding what you're processing in your mind and your heart, it will become as though you're seeing yourself through my heart. And when someone exhibits that kind of empathy towards you, you can actually see yourself better because your thoughts and feelings are being processed through the other person's heart. It's a very powerful spiritual dynamic. Whereas sympathy is just, well, I'm sorry that happened to you. But in empathy, it's a very, as Rupa Goswami said, it's a loving Vaishnava exchange, a very powerful dynamic. I mean, just as we can't live without prasadam, I mean, we like prasadam, but if we didn't eat, we would die. So in the same way, if we don't have those kind of relationships with deep understanding and caring empathy, we can actually wither spiritually.
So I see somebody commented in the chat, the need to find your own ponies. So that kind of continues on from Leela Shuka's question about self-empathy. I also find that when my husband's trying to find my pony, I have to stop and think, is that my pony? And what is my pony? And what do I need? Because sometimes I'm responding in a little bit of an irritated way because I don't know what my need is. And I'm kind of like searching for it. So I'm getting a little bit irritated. So by having a person reach out and try to help you even find your own pony, that's really helpful to gain deeper introspection into ourselves. Govinda Priya, did anybody else?
Yes, so Malti Prabhu has a follow-up question. You could unmute her.
Okay.
Hare Krishna. I didn't plan to ask this question, but it was such a beautiful point about empathy, and I'm realizing this is really speaking to the heart of some of my interests. So how do we increase our own empathy, and how do we help our partner to develop empathy? Especially if they're not necessarily the ones aware of or wanting to develop empathy.
So again, we're talking about the male-female paradox.
Love it.
And if you can, especially in marital relationships, you need that feeling of heart-to-heart connection. And sometimes if you can have, one gentleman, he told us that his daughter, he asked him, Dad, can we have a DMC, a deep, meaningful conversation? Or usually when you have deep, meaningful conversations, you're getting into the realm of empathy. And a very important dialogue that couples can have is you can have this discussion trying to understand what you both need to feel that heartfelt connection. And generally for women, it's going to be empathy. They need that, to feel understood. And for men, we're a little more complex, but if men can also understand that you care about what they need, and if you can understand they may need a little different approach to connection, it can make men feel a little more comfortable. Because sometimes, especially in this field of marital education, or if you do a marital seminar, all the ladies, they want to come and all the guys are just freaking out. I don't want to talk about feelings in relationships. It's going to be a big problem. So we tell couples, don't so much, or we tell ladies, don't so much put the focus on, I want you to talk to me. I want you to be empathic. You can say, can we have a discussion about developing our connection? And use empathic listening to help understand him. And then he'll start to realize, okay, she's understanding me. And
I think one way to go around it is just to be curious. And when they say something, just say, why? And, oh, why? And when they answer, they'll find that they have to think a little bit and they'll answer. And just to be non-judgmental, when they say it, just say, oh, that's interesting. Wow, that's dumb. You're going to clam them right up again, right? But just keep those whys going, like the 2-year-old. Why, mommy? Why, mommy? Why? But in a different tone of voice, of course.
Mm-hmm.
I think there was Ananda that's been trying to
she has a question.
Raise your hand there, yeah?
Okay, let me unmute her. Ananda, you're unmuted. What's going on?
All right. I just wanted to give a comment. Thank you for this really amazing presentation and discussion on the question of the fundamental difference. And I just had an experience recently, last week, with my husband, who we've been married quite a long time, and of course recently been stuck at home together for a number of months. But it was with regard just this whole eruption of Black Lives Matter and social justice. And I could sense that we really both had a different reaction to that, and our response to that was different. And I could feel the tension coming in just the way we dealt with each other throughout the day. And I couldn't figure out what it was until I finally thought, yeah, that's it, how I wanted to respond or act was very different than how he was processing and dealing with it. And so when I finally brought it up and we talked about it a little bit, it was just so much better. And it speaks to your point. He's going to be who he is and I'm going to be who I am. Mm-hmm. But the fact that we were able to just get it out there, the tension left. I saw that we were both thinking the same way, just approaching it from a different angle as well.
Yeah. Right.
So that was one point. And then the other one was about, and you brought it up earlier with finding the pony. But they say a very good question to ask is, along with why, to keep that it's often rarely the first answer that is is at the root. So another good question to ask is, is there, and what else, or is there something else?
Right.
I've understand this.
Tell me more.
Else? And that just again helps both the asker and the listener to know that maybe there's something else, and maybe there isn't. But that door is opened, and very often then, something else will come out. So,
I can testify to that because I, like almost all men, am somewhat infected by toxic masculinity. And I remember having this conversation with Uttama, and she kept asking why, and trying to go a little deeper, and it just really helped me to open up to my emotional side a lot more, which had really been kind of suppressed and blocked. So for men, that's I think a very valuable thing as ladies. If you can help your husbands or your kids actually do that, it's very important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very good. Other questions?
Good point. Yeah,
thanks for sharing that, Ananda. Yes.
So Tulsi Lata, I'm going to unmute you. Please, you can ask your questions. Just give me 1 minute.
Hare Krishna Mataji, Dandavat Pranam. I have a very daunting question that is specifically for me. Thing is that suppose you are telling about that pony and all. Okay, I'm telling the scenario where I find the pony, but I can't do anything, but I have to act like that. Suppose my husband is diabetic and he likes to eat all sweet mangoes, and in this lockdown he is very foodie person and he is eating all the way, and I'm shouting at him, don't eat, and I'm always behind him stopping. And then but I know his needs, that he likes that, he likes to eat mangoes, likes to, but I cannot do anything. But it is not good to be end up, sometimes I feel I'm not compassionate towards him. Sometimes I feel what else can I do if he is spoiling his own health? What can I do? So even though he knows my need, that I love him so much, and that's why he's telling, but he tells like, okay, it's okay, no problem. If I eat, I will take more medicine, I will control somehow. But this thing of contention point is that we are not able to digest his habit. I'm not liking his habit of eating like this, and he's not liking my habit of stopping him. So in that scenario, what is the right thing, like how to be compassionate towards each other without spoiling our relationship?
One way, like, behaviors are very difficult to change, and I mean, sometimes one dramatic way behaviors change if someone has a serious health crisis. You don't want that to happen to your husband. But what you can do is try and encourage his positive behavior. Maybe if he's eating some sweet that's more healthy. There was an interesting article that was written by a journalist on how they train animals. And so she was studying how they can train a monkey to ride a skateboard. It doesn't really make any sense. How can you get a monkey to ride a skateboard? So she went and was studying how they do this. So they have the monkey in a big room, and if he gets within 10 feet of the skateboard, they give him a peanut. If he gets within 5 feet of the skateboard, they give him 2 peanuts. If he sits on the skateboard,
banana,
they give him a banana. If the banana moves, maybe they give him a mango. And somehow, by this positive gradual reinforcement, somehow or other, she was observing they can actually get monkeys to ride skateboards. So this lady, the journalist, she said, well, I'm going to try this out with my husband. Because she said he would always just throw his laundry on the floor. And so she said, if his husband dropped his socks, 2 feet closer to the laundry basket, she'd like give him a big hug and say, thanks.
He didn't know why. He didn't even say thanks. He just gave him a hug.
But eventually caught on. And so the point was that if we express appreciation for the positive things we see, so, somehow if you can find those moments where maybe he's making some healthier alternative, and express some appreciation, how that maybe that makes you feel secure, because you feel secure about yourself. So you want to be encouraging and reinforcing the positive things that you see, because when we tend to point out the negative things, often we get the opposite reaction. People tend to dig in their heels even more. So find some gradual way to, if you make laddus with some kind of a
quite a while back, I needed to lose about 50 pounds. And my husband was very supportive. It was always hard when I had kids because everybody wants a different diet. You got all this stuff around. But he was going, well, I could lose 2 pounds and 2 pounds. I got 50, he's got 2. Okay. But so he just kind of like went in my shoes, and whatever I was eating, he would eat. And then he had a secret stash that I didn't see. And he would like go and like add when he was hungry and he needed something more. So sometimes, we do need to kind of like step in their shoes and, maybe just do it with them. It doesn't hurt us. Diabetic diet never hurt anybody. We could be healthier too. Like kind of be there with them,
Yes, ma'am, Mataji, that I'm been cutting down my sugar level because I'm very fond of mangoes too. So I've been cutting off that from long time. Actually, yeah, that's a
Yeah.
different story. But yeah,
Different
that
story.
is
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
I'm trying my best, but
Yeah.
because of this lockdown and staying in home, it is becoming more and more complex because he has access to kitchen and all. If he goes to work, he has a particular
Yeah.
box check and put, but now he has more
Yeah.
access.
So yeah, lockdown is definitely more challenging. But the good side is it brings up the issues we need to work on. So, you know, getting difficult's okay because it's going to force us to deal with them. Can look at it positively. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
So, you know, a lot of this finding the need, it actually comes from, I was going to say Stephen Rosenberg. What's his name? Marshall Rosenberg. Nonviolent communication. He discovered that anytime someone has a negative behavior, it's because they have an unmet need. So that's why it's very important if we want to help people both diminish their negative behavior and for us to understand that they're just behaving negatively because they have this unmet need. It's very helpful. That's why this finding the pony, it's a different mindset. It allows us to be more compassionate to other people, that the reason they're having this negative behavior is because of the unmet need. So this isn't just a response just to you, Tulsi Lata, it's like to everybody, a general one. So you'll see that very often there's other devotees in ISKCON, they also teach nonviolent communication because it's such a helpful tool of being compassionate with others. So I know Bir Krishna Maharaj, he has a couple of books out. Marshall Rosenberg's books on nonviolent communication, you know, they're all great. It's just going deeper into finding the pony.
It's very interesting. There's individuals who have understood compassion on very, very deep levels, like this Marshall Rosenberg. I was mentioning this Dr. Stephen Dasi. He's actually spent his life, his adult life, researching compassion. And so there's individuals, they don't understand the whole Vaishnava philosophy, but they have understood some aspects even better than we do as Vaishnavas, and we can benefit by taking advantage of the knowledge that they've learned and understood.
And applying it to our practical application of Krishna consciousness, which we will automatically be doing as we become more Krishna conscious. Did anyone else have their hands raised, Govinda Priya, or did you want to?
So we have, I don't know the name, it's T. Surit. She sent me a private message. And
yeah, I couldn't figure out how to raise my hand here. But I just think it was kind of, it's easier, to be compassionate, to apply the skills when people that sometimes not so strongly in our life. But I'm sure from your own experience, it's the hardest when you have in your relationships, the close relationship. And I just wondered if you have any tips or so to where to start. I mean, I'm saying to start, like I know I've been nonviolent communication for some years, and I know a lot of the tools from different other seminars and stuff, and it's always extremely difficult to start at home. So
yeah, that's why we usually try to suggest finding the pony and turning your complaints into requests, and just stopping and trying to reflect back the understanding of the other person. We actually found that those are one of the 3 best skills to start with. That's why we kind of teach them the most when we start out. So, because when you think of the whole gamut of nonviolent communication, it may be overwhelming, but if at least you can start with, finding the pony, then gradually we find that you add more skills on once you perfect a few. It's not that you have to get good at all of them, but just start anywhere.
Yeah.
And we've also found that if you can do them in your closer relationships, you're going to become really expert. Because if you can do them in your closer relationships, you can do them anywhere.
And it can be difficult because we tend to develop ingrained habits in terms of relationships and relationship patterns. And again, it can take time to break those habits. But I think one thing that can really help is actually realizing that Krishna is actually in our life. It's not just about me and her, or me and her and the kids and the grandkids. It's actually about me and her and Krishna, that we actually want to also please Krishna by our relationship. And like, I would never be disrespectful towards someone in the temple, but so why is it we're doing that and the doors are closed? But I mean, there's Gaura like 15 feet away from us, and Radha Krishna are just behind us, and it's actually, the picture is not different than Krishna, and that's actually Krishna consciousness. If we could realize that, so if we can realize that, that will help us develop this compassionate communication. And at the same time, if we actually develop compassionate communication, that'll help us realize the picture is actually Krishna. It works both ways. And so it's difficult. And I just like to say also, one thing our group is trying to do, at least we've instituted in Canada, a policy that if couples want to get married in a temple, they're required to get some pre-marital mentorship. So we give them a realistic expectation of what marriage is about. It's not just a resort destination. It's a journey of adventure. There's going to be challenges and difficulties. You're going to have differences. But in the very beginning, we teach them, here's some skills you can utilize to negotiate your differences and your challenges. So right from the beginning, they start to realize, okay, there's ways we can work through this. Whereas generally, we all experience, we get married and we kind of get embedded in these negative behavioral patterns, and we have to disentangle ourselves. So we're trying to get a culture where we support marriages right from the beginning to help them flourish from the beginning. But it's never too late to start.
And just the fact that you want to, Krishna will help you.
Yeah.
All right. I think I saw a hand by Radharani something, or was that right, Govinda?
Oh, Anita Prabhu had something.
Okay, I saw something flash up.
Yes, Anita Prabhu, you're unmuted.
I think I just put some things in the chat, that's all. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Anita. We'll have to scroll back up and find them. So you want to read it to us, Govinda Priya?
Yeah, I think her question was, where can we find more information about your upcoming seminars, presentations?
We're doing one on the 20th. Where? You know where the best place to find all of these things is on that Sadhvi Sangha chat. They seem to advertise theirs and everybody else's. Like they advertise the Vaishnava ministry, and I guess we should get better at posting them on our own website, advertise ourselves.
We also have a Facebook page called Grihastha Vision Team. And there's a link to our website. There's a handout that should have been emailed. On the bottom of the handout, there's a link to our website and also some other articles that are on our website that involve compassion. And you'll find all kinds of resources. Yeah.
I can just tell you that the next one is on the 23rd with the Sadhvi Sangha retreat, and that is the 27th, not the 23rd, 27th. So I can at least tell you when the next one is. We don't actually have any others planned, but they pop up
actually,
quickly.
there's one other one coming up around July 1st. It's called a Global Bhakti Yoga Seminar. Someone just contacted us, so we can try to send your group some information on that when that's time is settled for that. But we're going to do a session on how marriage is actually yoga, bhakti yoga.
So we shall try to post them on our Facebook page, Grihastha Vision Team. How's that? Yeah. I never like to toot my own horn, so we never do it. We will start. Thanks for the inspiration.
Thank you so much. Tulsi Lata Prabhu has a quick question. She's asking, do you do any parenting sessions too?
We don't. We've more specialized in premarital and marital. Krishna Nandini's doing a homeschooling parenting one sometime this week. I think that's advertised all over the internet, and we did advertise that on our Facebook page. Very, very needed. Just not my, I mean, we do have 3 kids and 6 grandkids, but I haven't perfected the presentation of parenting skills.
Thank you so much. It was such a wonderful presentation, and the interaction and the questions and all of this was just so enlivening. For me personally, the dynamics between the two of you and your relationship is just so sweet, and it was very, very nourishing, and I think there's hope.
We'll get offline. We'll get offline and we'll have a big fight.
We do not.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you to all the Vaishnavis that have joined us today and participated so actively.
And I would like to thank you, and I feel honored for being invited into your sacred space. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. It is very special to actually see such healthy relationships of, marriages.
Only takes 50 years. Keep working at it, you'll get there.
Yeah. 19 years down. Okay. So like I said, there's still hope. Thank you so much. It was really, really wonderful. And thank you so much. We are going to meet 2nd and 4th Saturdays. So on the 4th Saturday of this month, we have Urmila Prabhu and Prabhupada Priya Prabhu. And they're going to be sharing their realizations about how to find joy in reading Srila Prabhupada's books. That's our upcoming seminar. So
better luck next life.
Details will be following soon. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much, Partha Prabhu, Uttama Prabhu, and all
Thank you.
Did you want to leave, or did you want to say anything?
I will end the meeting for all.
Okay.
Okay.